All right, hello everyone. Welcome. We'll give everyone a few moments to join the webinar and then we will get started. All right, I've got two afters, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to AI Virginia's Building Reuse and Decarbonization webinar series, presented by AI Virginia's HRC and VA Code. My name is Delaney Ogden. I'm the Director of Education for AI Virginia and the host helping with presenting the webinar today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will have the chat feature available to you today, so please feel free to engage with others on the webinar. Let people know where you're calling in from, maybe what firm you're with or company. And then we will also have a Q&A portion towards the end of the presentation. So please make sure to use that Q&A tool. If you think of any questions during the presentation today, you can use that to put your questions in that tool. If you're having any connection challenges, please make sure to remain on Zoom. Zoom does a really great job of trying to get you reconnected automatically. So just give it a moment and you'll probably get reconnected. In addition, for optimum bandwidth, you want to make sure that all of your background apps are closed and programs. And after the session, I'll be sending out a survey to get your feedback about this session. So we would love to hear your thoughts. So please complete that when you receive it. The session today has been submitted for AIA CES approval. The credits will be reported to everyone within 10 business days. And if you do require or would like a certificate of completion, just make sure to send myself an email and I can get that created for you. And as I stated, we'll have a short Q&A period after the presentation. Now I'd like to turn over to Lisa Tucker, a part of our AI Virginia Historic Resources Committee, for a few comments. Lisa?
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, welcome everyone. This is a joint effort between the AIA Virginia HRC and COAT committees, and we're pleased to announce the Building Reuse and Decarbonization webinar series. This is a four-part series that will showcase the overlaps between historic preservation and sustainability that help reduce our carbon footprint. The building industry is one of the largest producers of carbon emissions, and by adapting existing buildings to support contemporary needs rather than demolishing and building new, we can avoid emitting thousands of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. With the growing shift towards renovation over new construction, this webinar series will show how the renewal of existing buildings as high-performance facilities creates a sustainable and resilient world. The series brings together leading experts in architecture, interior design, sustainability, and electrical engineering. And before I introduce today's speaker, I wanted to introduce Rebecca Aaron Sidner. She is with Mead and Hunt Architecture and Engineering as their sustainability team leader, and she will be moderating today's session. So Rebecca, if you just want to say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce to you Linda Sorrento. She is a lead fellow and a fellow of ASID. She's dedicated over 4 decades to advancing sustainable design, human health, and material transparency in the built environment. As the COO Emerita of Mindful Materials and the former director of lead for commercial interiors at USGBC, she has shaped national standards for healthy, high-performance spaces. She also serves on the Bio-Based Materials Collective Education Group, which champions regenerative practices. A nationally recognized educator and advocate, she continues to lead through mentorship, collaboration, and impact, and doing things like she's doing today for us. So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, Linda Sorrento. Linda?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, for that kind introduction. And Rebecca, for our conversation coming up today, Delaney for organizing this, and all of you that have joined the call today. I'm so excited to talk about the third stage of my career, which, by the way, I just celebrated my 50th year in the practice. And this third phase is, for me, the most fun and meaningful phase of my career. So I'm going to talk about the mischief I'm in right now and share my screen. All right. I hope that everyone can see my screen. All right.
Yep, looks great, Linda.
Okay, thanks. I'll get going with a thought that I had in thinking about the connection between several topics that I'm speaking about today. And this is the carbon buster. The carbon buster of going back to the Neolithic time, 10,000 BCE, and how ancient civilizations organized for the first time and using materials that they had on hand. So there was no issue with carbon at that time. The issue was the basic idea of survival and working with materials at hand. So this conversation today is really about what is old is new again, and what we need to boldly think about in the resurgence of natural materials in order to address carbon and health at the same time, and sustainability. So we've seen this statistic so many times before. This actually came from an AIA report in thinking about, the problem that we have of 40% of our annual global CO2 emissions created by the construction industry. And whether it's new construction, reuse, renovation, we're all in the same boat that we have to address. And there's urgency around this because that urgency affects human health as well. And this came from Healthy Building Network or Habitable, and thinking about their work in reducing toxic materials. But it's so related to carbon because these are the factories, these are the fence line communities, these are Cancer Alley. These are things that we need to disrupt and address as soon as possible. So Habitable and Design for Freedom are deep into solving this problem, and we can count on their resources and their great work. So today, just as context, I'm looking at these key linking elements with this foundation of mindful materials and common materials framework. And if you don't know that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the presentation. So I'm thinking carbon reduction, bio-based materials, building reuse as they surround mindful materials. And when we look at carbon reduction, where mindful materials comes into play in the carbon materials framework tool, that embodied carbon and climate health are linked and talked about. And then when we look at bio-based materials for the Common Materials Framework, ecosystem health, and then climate health, and looking at biogenic carbon. And for historic preservation, adaptive reuse, and building reuse, we're into a circular economy. But those are not alone in this circle. Human health is always part of all of this, and social health and equity as well, as indicated in a previous slide. So I also wanted to set the stage. This is from ASHRAE, which is a fantastic diagram in their Carbon 101 series, and looking at what is embodied carbon and what is operational carbon, illustrated here. And we talk about this in the Common Materials Framework, as well as circular economy, when we talk about building reuse. So these terms we all need to know, we all need to be on the same page. And thank you to ASHRAE and the great engineers and folks involved in that for creating this good guide. So what is bio-based material? Well, bio means a lot of things, and there are a lot of terms. So I joined the bio-based materials collaborative, and this was about a year ago, and as part of the education working group, we needed to have a common definition. So we're working on this right now, but our basic definitions, thinking about biomass as feedstock, so biological materials and agriculture and forestry, fungi, marine recycled content. And we're also considering adjacent materials and sources from soil and mineral sources. Moving into biogenic carbon, this is where we start to measure carbon that's originating from that biomass feedstock. And of course, that leads into our materials and products that we derived in whole or in part from biomass feedstock. So we're really exploring the definitions and how that is relative to our common language in describing what is bio. So I wanted to go through a little of history and my history with this transformation. And this was after my work with USGBC and LEAP for Commercial Interiors. And diving into a deep dive into materials, because this is in 2014, we found a huge gap and confusion in that area. So the Materials Knowledge Working Group was formed by AIA, which was a fantastic start to gather together a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary group. And we started forming, what is materials sustainability. So we established a position statement, a risk white paper. I was involved with heading up the materials matter education. Then we had a pause for a little bit and thought, what's important? What's next? So this common language idea came up, and that was the startup in 2017, the startup, the Materials Pledge. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So initiated Materials Pledge, initiated by the Materials Knowledge Working Group, established the framework for the rest of the industry. So this was a very important start as we looked at our common language, because unless we had a common language, we didn't know how to collaborate or talk with each other. We didn't know how to start our market transformation. We didn't know how to create a movement. And now we have the starter guide and reporting methodology. So then Mindful Materials at the same time in 2014 was started by and founded by HKS, so founded by Industry for Industry, presented at the Materials Knowledge Working Group. And we all said, wow, this is really interesting because this starts to look at how to engage practice, and especially in the libraries in practice, to start to embed the materials pledge, or the idea that materials need to be disclosed and have transparency. And so that became first and foremost, and many of the people in the group started thinking about collaborating around this idea of HKS and mindful materials to support this more broadly than just one firm. And so we gathered together as a collective, similar to the beginnings of Bio-Based Materials Collective, and started talking and organizing. Then in about 2019, 2020, we started to think about how the materials pledge and that common language could be brought into the marketplace. In order to do that, Mindful Materials had to grow up and become a 501c3 in the early 2020s in order to bring that to the marketplace. So this is Mindful Materials with industry-wide collaboration, streamlined data flows, scalable tools and resources. And now we're looking at the Materials Easier button. Then in 2024, as I mentioned, that Mass got together and founded the Bio-Based Materials Collective. And originally it was just going to be in Northeast US collective, but last year decided to broaden this in order to understand what bio-based materials means and how to address this as an opportunity as decarbonization and increasing health positive impacts. So that is made up of a collaborative communications group, education, regulations, and innovation. So this is some of the early shots of Materials Knowledge Working Group. You probably recognize some of the key players there with Lana and Rochelle and Bill and Larry. All of these folks are so involved and dedicated to making materials a positive impact. And here are Mindful Materials peeps, and it's comprised of this photograph is comprised of owners, AEC manufacturers, tech, eco-level standards, NGOs. These are all part of the Mindful Materials Forum members. These are the folks that are creating the tools for practice. These are the folks that are creating the easier button to get to better materials and specification. Here are bio-based materials peeps, and this was from our recent summit in Burlington, Vermont. And look at the group that this is comprised of. So the agricultural farmers, suppliers, researchers, academics, AEC, regulatory, finance, education, and training. There's some commonality, but as a startup group, and this is our natural materials group, and had lots of fun at our summit. So what is the state of materials industry? So when AIA's Materials Knowledge Working Group picked this up, it was mass confusion. Building Green created the first brain map of all the certifications out there, standards, the people working on it, and was just confusing, disparate groups working on their own thing. And so it was very hard to start to have this common language, very tough to progress towards market transformation. So what we did was start to organize around the Materials Pledge, and fast forward, Mindful Materials helped to shape it even further into an organized way as far as the common materials framework, to take it into the marketplace that measured impact in a very, very structured way. So again, recognizing the categories of the Materials Pledge: human health, climate, ecosystem, social equity, and a circular economy. But mindful materials came in to create the structure behind that. So what are we measuring for human health? At this point, we're measuring in the sub buckets of product substances and VOCs, and that's directly linked to Habitable and what they're working on. Climate health, embodied carbon, and carbon impact, the theme that we're talking about in the series. Ecosystem health, product environment impacts, biodiversity and conservation. That's the Bio-Based Materials Collective, social health and equity, company, workplace ownership, and product supply chain. And that's all the work of Grace Farms and circular economy, sourcing the end of life and facility waste. And that's building reuse, another theme of this series. So it's being covered by different organizations, but in a very aligned way. We're building a shared vision. This shared vision wouldn't be possible unless we worked together. Otherwise, this strong foundation will collapse. We'll go back to that crazy mind map in the original discussions from AIA's Materials Knowledge Working Group. We'll go back to that confusion. We will go back to no progress. We will go back to no innovation. So what we're doing at Mindful Materials is leaping forward with these levers of change with a strong foundation. We understand that the industry needed a connected data ecosystem to scale in order to adopt sustainable materials. We started digitizing this in a subset of priority data points, which I'll look at to make this work much more manageable. And then we needed to send this collective impact, this clear market signal, so that others across our industry in a transdisciplinary way would adopt this. And this is a scan of our forum members and partners. So you'll recognize key names there. Of course, AIA is there as one of our key partners, but firms, owners, AEC, and manufacturers, we're all in it together, along with the standards organizations, the technology that drives this engine. All of us are in this together, working together in a non-competitive way. We wouldn't be able to do this unless we were all talking together and collaborating. We're working towards this. It's not quite out yet, so this is an evolution of the materials library. It's an evolution that applies the common material framework and all the substances, the embodied carbon, the company workplace, all of that together, so that firms can create their own dashboard in a very organized way, so that they can communicate with manufacturers. It's unbelievable the amount of time that it takes, not only with firms to find the materials, to understand they're choosing the right materials, and for manufacturers to provide that specific data and answer the hundreds of thousands of questions they get from disparate firms creating their own means to an end. So it's not so easy. So we're creating that shared roadmap and the vision for the future. We're creating a collective alignment and data availability and that trust behind data. And we're providing technology and resources. We need all of this. And this is the work of the forums. In the forums, we have the structure behind what Mindful Materials is doing at the center of this hub and with the engines around it. So on the first line, you'll see the standards organizations. Then you'll see the technology groups. Then in the center, Mindful Materials is translating that through the Common Materials Framework. And the output of that goes to the market connection, like Building E's, Material Bank, Source, Red to Green. And that information flows right into the workflow tools at the firms and the owners to simplify and organize the information. And there's a place for everyone. There's a place for investors at the organizational level, which is our forums, owners, AC, regulation, policy. At the project level rating systems, the tech codes, and then moving into product specific categories, help with habitable and informed, design for freedom and their toolkits, carbon leadership forum, built reuse and circularity baselines, and then over with a brand and product specific and looking at the common materials frameworks, the certifications, data management, and then of course the manufacturers. So it's working together with this idea of innovation and of course optimization. And this is a deeper dive at the common materials framework and the subcategories and transparency, optimization, categories, assessment. As you look through this, we started looking at the different data points. So it was between 600 beyond data points, and it was much too difficult to manage. So this was our first organizational chart for the Common Materials Framework and what it included. But after a 2-year deep dive in this, we have narrowed this down with the help of our forums, narrowed this down to 42 data sets versus 600 data sets, which was totally not manageable. So this is a sneak preview of what's going to be launched in the next few weeks, taking a look at human health, climate, circular economy, social health and equity, and ecosystem health, and the 42 data points and the links to the relevant certification and the most often requested information, especially for LEED v5, Living Building Challenge, and and other needs and standards across the globe. So a little bit of a deeper dive, you can see that in climate health, and this is when we start to talk about embodied carbon, and this in particular is relevant to the conversation we're having in the series, that at the top level of transparency, that's where the various certifications reside that are relative to embodied carbon. And then we start to ask the question that are being asked by all the requirements for LEED v5, well, the materials pledge reporting, and then we provide the metrics, which are the answers. So very familiar standards that are part of this. So you see EPDs, we also see declare and other third-party verification. So this is the first level of transparency. Then looking at specifically embodied carbon and optimization, those are the certifications and disclosures that are relative to optimization. And you can see that biogenic carbon comes into play here as far as bio-based materials. And so bio-based materials are already starting to be incorporated into the common materials framework and providing a place for bio-based materials to grow. And looking at the carbon impact and looking at transparency, what the certifications, the disclosures are part of transparency as far as carbon impact. And so you can see by transparency at the high level there, the various relevant certifications, the factors we're looking at, like GHG emissions in scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And then the commitments that are part of all of this at that level, the climate pledge, for example. And then lastly, for optimization, looking at the certifications, the disclosures that are relative to the carbon impact. So that's a quick overview of the common materials framework in one of these sections. So I'm going to dive into old as new again, and this is the role of bio-based materials. So we review the common materials framework and the various organizations related to that and mindful materials and what we're up to. Now we're going to take a look at what bio-based materials, what we're currently up to, which is at the very beginning of this movement. So there's more questions than answers, but there are a few people that are starting to dive into this because it is so important. It's so important because we have many reports out there and surveys and the cases for building renovation and addressing climate. I chose the one here that from AIA with Z. Smith and others looking at building reuse and climate action. If you haven't seen it, it's a report that you should look at it. And so one of the diagrams that I pulled out was looking at the built environment, the buildings built in 2020 and earlier versus the buildings built after 2022. The hope is the buildings built after 2022 take into all of the common materials framework structure, but the greater hope is to use that existing building stock and not build new buildings, not to have the increase of new buildings, actually make the building stock that we have better. And so you can see on the side all those stats pulled out from this report. And what I want to point out is, of course, renovating is a carbon smart strategy. And we know that with lower emissions than new construction. We're going down the wrong direction to have new construction without consideration. And I'm sure the audience here today that you're on board with this. And then looking at the potential of scaling carbon removal, starting to research what that means so we can start to have some baseline information. And this report came from Rocky Mountain Institute. Rocky Mountain Institute has been really taking the lead in looking at bio-based materials. So they're applying resources there for research, just as Habitable has done for health and Grace Farms has done for social equity. So we're looking towards this partnership with Rocky Mountain Institute. So one of their first reports was looking at the possibility of natural materials, bio-based materials, in their ability to store carbon and also carbon removal. So you're looking at the dark blue as the potential of that. And you can see if we increase the use of bio-based materials, we increase the possibility of carbon storing and carbon removal. And so that makes sense when you go back here and you start to look at the buildings that are in the reuse category, that we can shift outcomes with bio-based materials. And just a scan of, what are those bio-based materials and where can they be used in the building? And so this is just a quick scan of that. And so there's, this is a great diagram, but are there going to be issues along the way? I'm going to talk about some of those challenges coming up. So roof, ceiling, flooring, interior partitions, cladding, insulation, structural sheathing, floor slabs. The FF&E is not addressed here. Furnishings and furniture not addressed here, but as far as the building, base building and interior partitions, there are materials either under use or being developed in all of these different categories. And so again, with the Rocky Mountain Institute, looking at those, defining what those materials are in those different product categories and how that translates into bio-based materials is important. So this is in the ideal world. I wish that bio-based materials are affordable and scalable. There's an opportunity of 9.7 trillion or more in the future. In 2022, there was investments in retrofits. I wish in an ideal world that existing feedstocks understood and are readily available, and their use supports farmers and rural manufacturing opportunities. And we saw this in play in a small scale in our bio-based materials summit in Burlington, where we went to the farms. We went to the wheat farms and looking at straw and looking at how straw is used in building materials. We looked at sawmills and they talked about their investment in this new frontier. But this was a very, very small scale. And in an ideal world, environmental benefits using the residue from biomass avoids harmful practices. And no new land conversion, proven technology and building processes. Because right now the building processes are old, they're hands-on. It hasn't shifted over to scalable manufacturing and larger project opportunities. Long-term storage and thinking about what are those years of a building? Is it 60 or is it 200 years? and lessons learned from a global basis, looking at opportunities for mainstream construction, taking down those barriers so our ideal world comes true. So adapting material performance expectations, increasing awareness, scaling production, enhancing detailing and quality control. You can imagine all of these and how this impacts this movement. Additionally, investing in research and testing and aligning with regulations and insurance and leveraging policy changes. And housing happens to be the first step to adoption. You can see the yurt is coming back. So if we were to look at a case study, this is one we learned about at our Bio-Based Materials Collective Summit in March or in May. We looked at the new frameworks, and they're a manufacturing for bio-based material straw panels for small housing development. And this is in Essex, Vermont. So we visited their factory and looked at how they're creating panels from a straw bale, and how it has to be structured so it meets building code and is protected from things like pests and fire. We looked at how they're actually making this doable. They're building small homes out of the straw panels. They're building in efficiency. They're building in local relationships and sources. They're making their spaces through research and making their spaces and engineering, making their spaces climate positive. They're structuring their factories in a social, equitable way as far as it's worker owned and cooperative. So this is the interrelationship of the agricultural cooperatives from the 18th century to today and bringing those back in order to make bio-based materials work. So as we think about our collective momentum, think about back when the AIA's Materials Knowledge Working Group first began, and how 30 people got together to say, this is enough. We have an opportunity to make change. We have an opportunity to take that confusing mind map and create an organized common language in order to reduce the negative impacts that materials have to making the positive impacts. But we wouldn't be able to do that unless we had collective momentum. So Mindful Materials very excitingly worked very hard to have the common materials framework integrated across the large standards organization. So at Greenville 2023, we announced that Mindful Materials, AIA, USGBC, Living Future, and IWBI all got together and we all said the AIA's Materials Knowledge Working Group pledge through the Common Materials Framework from Mindful Materials would be aligned and integrated, obviously holistically integrated into their standards and certifications. so that we could drive new and existing building construction in the right way. This was huge. Yeah, and I'd like to get a high five on this one. This was really, really hard and took almost 10 years to do, but got it done. We got it done because LEED v5 has the criteria areas of human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health, and equity, circular economy into the rating system. This is so much different from 2005 when I started at USGBC and heading up LEED for commercial interiors. And that was version 1. And wow, I just can't think of how far we've come, because that was all about single attributes. And we only looked at IAQ and VOCs, and we only looked at material reuse at that time. Now we're a holistically structured certification that communicates in a very comprehensive but easy to understand way. And then just announced last week that well V2 IWBI and USGBC would leave 5. And I just pulled out an example for IE&C crosswalk and incorporating the two together, breaking down those barriers. The next step, of course, is now with V5, crosswalking with V2 in the commitment that IWBI has to mindful materials in the common materials framework and the materials pledge, that we're all aligned in a holistic way. What's happening too in collective momentum, the mindful materials forums are intended to be cross-disciplinary and intended to share. So if you're part of the forums, you are sharing your great work, but others are sharing their work with you. So collectively, we can create this market transformation in a very, very good, comprehensive way. And this one is important. This is our collective momentum across the design community. It started with the pledge, and now AIA is reporting the results of that pledge. We're starting to see that data points are not even, and reporting and achievements is not even across the different pledge categories. It's well understood in human health, but it's not so understood in social health and equity. The tools, education are not there yet. They have not transformed as much yet. So our hope is in the future that this is all as balanced as possible. But this is a start. This was that the bar chart is the first reporting from November 2024. But we need more firms to participate because the numbers there actually indicate the firms. The more it's put into place, the more it's reported, the more ability we have to have a view of how our work is being advanced and how we have to elevate our tools to help that advancement, all for that end game of us as humans. It's our collective momentum is starting with research in bio-based materials, and thanking Rocky Mountain Institute for being our research guide. Also, the College of Built Environments from the University of Washington, which is where the Carbon Leadership Forum was born, and also the University of Washington, where the Materials Matter series was collaborated with and helped to create. So it again, as you can see, it goes back to the founding group that was spurred by the wisdom of Mary Ann Lazarus and her initial environmental scan that gave us the direction in 2010 to 2014. Lots of thanks there. So jumping in, how can you help and how can you get involved? And this is for Mindful Materials. Easy, sign up for the newsletter, go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, become a sponsor if you can, attend our events. Our events are more virtual in the future. Become a member. It's a very low cost and a lot of ways to be engaged in the different working groups. And of course, then join the forums. All of this is, and how to do this is on our website. And then pretty please sign on to the Materials Pledge and start reporting. Again, this goes back to our roots. And if we don't, and for our bio-based materials, if we don't grow those roots, we won't have a better future. Get involved with this fun group of people that remind me of my 70s experience with agriculture and landscape architecture and using natural materials. And now we have this energy to take the next step. So grow this from 300 really engaged folks to much more. And you can get a hold of the Bio-Based Materials Collective. We have a beginning website. And of course, reach out to James. His information is there on the slide. So kind of a closing reflection, and I'm going to open this up to Rebecca to start any questions you might have. I hope to answer them, but I also hope to know where to direct them. I'm actually a connector and I enjoy finding and understanding things. They call me the queen of findage. So if I don't know the answer, Rebecca, I will help you to direct that. And Delaney will help us to share answers to the questions or people to contact afterwards. So Rebecca, open this up to you.
Thank you, Linda. This was fantastic. I'm so excited that you were able to present with us. We'd like to open it up to the floor. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. The questions that Linda posted are not just for the two of us to answer, but we'd like to hear from the rest of you as to your ideas related to this topic. So while everyone's marinating on these questions, I've got a few more to ask. So the first is, you mentioned the AEC forum group under Mindful Materials. Could you speak a little bit more about how one gets involved, what's entailed with that involvement, and so forth?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And thanks for that question. As I mentioned, for Mindful Materials, our forum groups are the ones that are creating together collectively the tools that are transforming the industry. They're creating that easy button. They're helping to describe the common materials framework and those data points. They're the ones that inform this. And so what's involved is getting together with that group. We have on a biannual basis in-person summits. There's also 3 working groups or subgroups that look at technology, communications, standards. And so there's different ways to get involved once you're part of the AEC forum. AEC forum is not alone in the forums. As I mentioned, it's the owners. So you learn from the owners, your clients, and what their needs are. And then from the manufacturer's side of it, the manufacturers learn from the owners and they learn from the AEC what the needs are. All of this is intended to streamline our process and not to duplicate, but to be able to grow so we can open the boundaries to innovation and, of course, optimization across the board. And it's fun too if you love to geek out on this stuff. And I would imagine everybody on this webinar call are geeking out over all of this stuff because these are heavy, deep conversations that take a lot of work beyond your normal day. So getting involved, first step is to go to the website and look for the how to engage in the forums.
Thank you. Now, there's a question in the chat, so it relates very well with another question I had about how are you engaging with regulations and building codes to ensure that these new old materials can be permitted in commercial construction. And
Yeah.
Joy's question is related. Have you run into opposition at the local level? And are there any lessons learned yet with this?
Yeah. We're just at that beginning stage. So Rocky Mountain Institute has taken on the research behind that. We have to describe what this is first. And so having research and those data points behind it are important. So in fact, I have a call after this webinar with a group within Bio-Based Materials Collective that's addressing that issue. And it is comprised of researchers, scientists, practitioners, and builders to look at the issue with, or opportunities, of course, with codes. And because we don't want that to be a barrier, we have the opportunity right now to describe this so that we can develop the products and materials that have all these attributes that are that can be adopted by the different codes organizations. Now, we could take the Denmark way that actually it is more prescriptive and restrictive, or we can take a more collaborative approach. We're going to determine that as we move forward. But we recognize that that's a key area to address because we're looking at different types of materials. We're looking at different types of building assemblies. We're looking at different types of detailing to get this done. So it's a different discussion with our codes organization. So it's gonna take a while, but we're on it. So if you'd like to, who asked that question, if you'd like to get involved with that standards group, we'd love to have you and go to the Bio-Based Materials Collective website and reach out to James and get involved. We need your help.
So another question from the chat is about the Mindful Materials website currently, knowing that you're working on something that's coming later that I have a question about. So as far as the status right now, are there good databases through Mindful Materials or elsewhere that you would recommend for folks trying to find good bio-based products?
Yeah, so that's interesting. It's not there yet. We're in a conversation with, and thankfully we have someone to have a conversation with. Now that the Bio-Based Materials Collective has organized itself, eventually it will be moving into a nonprofit designation. So that's in process now, so that we can approach this in an organized manner and, of course, have the funding to do so. But at this point, it's not there yet. So there's lots of steps to take. Remember, it took for our first go around and all the lessons learned from that, we can cut that time, but it took us 10 years to get to where we are today. We Mindful Materials, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year, and that's the 10-year from HKS launch as a library labeling system to where we are today with the common materials framework. So it's going to take a bit, but that's first and foremost on our mind. And it's also on our mind that for bio-based materials collaborative to have the common materials framework there, to have a balanced approach to bio-based materials, a holistic balanced approach. So it's not just going to be about carbon, but it's going to be across all of the points. But because if you look at the manufacturing that I talked about in that small manufacturing, they're looking at the workers, the farm workers, and all of that. So that's going to be where we're going to learn from bio-based materials back to manufacturing for those large projects. So stay tuned on that. Keep pushing, keep asking those questions, and again, get involved because we need more representation from the architectural community, the design community with the bio-based materials.
So with this easy button or dashboard that is coming, are there thoughts about how it will be accessed and managed? For instance, a subscription, a membership, public, just free. How do you think it's going to look?
Yeah, so we're working that out. This is part of our 2026 to 2028 strategic plan. We're just coming off of our 2025 3-year strategic plan. And we're looking towards our forums to help with that. So right now, the forums are creating a toolkit that's going to be launched, of course, at Greenbuild. So I hope you're there. And if not, check out Mindful Materials website afterwards. That toolkit will have information about the easy button as well as other components of the easy button. So and so as far as the cost for that, of course, we're a nonprofit and we rely on funding in order to keep our great work going. All of that funding goes back into creating tools for practice. So I'm imagining from the small amount that we have as our member fees to the forum fees, and looking at, is it a crowdsourced way of funding or is it a licensed funding? So, or something else. So that's a question to be determined, probably by the end of this year as we launch that toolkit. So it's ready to go.
And what came to me while you were speaking was also the federal biopreferred label that uses an ASTM standard. I was wondering how and if that relates at all to this effort.
Yeah, it does because it's important for large entities to drive the marketplace with the tools of clarity that they provide. So any of the certification labels, standards, and you saw that as I was doing the preview, very small, but the preview that we got down to those 42 data points that do include the various standards and the most commonly asked requirements. That's how we got down from the 600 plus down to 42 are the most commonly asked. Those are the most commonly asked by the outputs, the receivers of this information. So you're talking lead, you're talking well, LBC, you're talking Materials Pledge as the receivers and others. So if those aren't driving that as a receiver, it's a little hard to get it going because of this idea of keeping it simple. But I must say, the larger entities that are supporting the creation of labeling systems like EPDs and others, HPDs, they're involved in the common materials framework. So it's integrated, but you have to ask for it. You have to specify those products with that trust and transparency. You got to do it, or it's not going to happen.
So Joe has another question concerning life cycle cost analysis. There are trade-offs between bio-based materials that might be made some distance away versus more locally available traditional materials. How do you determine what the best materials are for a given project when you probably should be thinking about the transportation impacts?
Yeah. And I must say, that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse because that's more in the wheelhouse that the research that is going ongoing at the Rocky Mountain Institute. So if you wouldn't mind going to the Rocky Mountain Institute and the Carbon Leadership Forum and starting to explore the answer to that question, because I got to say, I was just on a call last week and there were more questions than answers around how to measure bio-based materials and biogenic actually materials and LCAs. So there's different approaches and they're starting to hone in on the best approach to that. So keep looking at that from Rocky Mountain Institute in particular and Carbon Leadership Forum and the research, the ongoing research and the determinations. And also with the Bio-Based Materials Collective, that standards group that I'm talking to this afternoon, they're also trying to align this and explore this as well. So we have that common framework, we have that common language. What is a biogenic material? What's, feedstock? What's because we're looking at biofeedstock, but there's already, why not soil? Why not minerals? Because that's part of the assembly of a natural building product, a bio-based product. So a lot more questions. Sorry, I can't answer that specifically, but this is, again, a new frontier. But we have folks working very hard at clarifying this and taking a direction that is a common direction.
And I would just add that one thing that could help is, um, we typically do a charrette or a workshop at the beginning of each project to understand what the owner's goals and priorities are. And Having a good workshop like that could provide the guidance to be able to make those kinds of decisions, knowing which is a higher priority or what those priorities are for the owner.
Yeah, great point, Rebecca, because I think in our novel materials, which are the new materials, it's it's the, your client understanding the benefits of those novel materials in order to get this through. Um, and it's an imperative that you have this conversation in the shred to look at those different pathways.
We've got something else from Lauren Bailey. So she says that mindful materials has come a long way, and being on the owner side at a public university, budgets are tight for material and for staff to keep track and stay up to date with all of the information. She loves seeing AE firms having their own platforms based on mindful materials, and we encourage consultants to suggest better materials to use. So her question is, in the new website, will there be a location for an owner instead of a design firm to build a mindful materials standard or database?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, our owners forum, they are creating tools specific to their community, the owners community. So, but they are collaborating across the board with AC and manufacturers to make sure there's clear lines of communication. But owners do have specific needs, especially owners that have large portfolios like campuses. And again, look for that information around Greenbuild, which is in LA in November, that there's always the big introductions after Greenbuild. It's a good a place for us a time frame for us to target to get this everybody to get this done. But they're working really hard on this toolkit. So I'm hoping that you'll find resources there to help you. That's the intent.
And I just want to say, Lauren, this is a great idea because most, institutional owners like your university and others have design standards, and so do a lot of corporations and private entities. And, adding this aspect to the design standards would really be beneficial in a lot of ways.
And also to that point too, it can't be an impediment. So we have to make it easy and clear to be able to proceed if it's incorporated into the design standards, that that it's easier to, we don't want to say easier to do. So we don't want to have challenges in that regard. And so that's why this toolkit it is very helpful to break those barriers down and make it easier to incorporate it into your design standards.
Now, I have a very specific question on one of your slides where you talked about different bio-based materials that can be used throughout the project. For the concrete mix, there was something called biochar mixture or admixture, and I would love to know what that is.
Yeah. So, Rebecca, I did some research on that because learning about the newer additive materials to traditional materials is important. So biochar is a charcoal produced by heating organic material wood residue in a low oxygen environment through a process. And it removes volatile compounds, leaving behind a stable carbon-rich material. Very cool.
Very cool.
So if you just looked at that, I'd specify that in a minute. But it has carbon negative, it has soil enhancement, it has waste management, environmental benefits, all those sorts of things. But the challenges at this point to that is exactly what we were talking about earlier is what's that long-term durability? What's the structural integrity? And what's the workability to this? So it has great promise, but it still needs work as far as research and testing and all of that. And that circles back to codes and assemblies and all of that discussion. So it's going to take a bit. We have some tried and true things on this list: flooring, linoleum. My parents installed linoleum in their house in 1952, and that is still going. I mean, it's in the kitchen and it's still good. Why aren't we using that linoleum? Well, at that time in the 1950s, it was produced in the US. Now it's, produced outside of the US, and going back to that LCA question in the transportation. So it became price prohibitive, and other types of materials have come in and replaced it, unfortunately. But that linoleum, so tried and true. And the others are not so tried and true quite yet. But this is what the Rocky Mountain Institute is researching and trying to kind of dig into that and see how see how we can stabilize that information.
Now, Lauren had a follow-up comment about having, 3 similar materials to select from, because as a state entity, nothing can be sole sourced. So that led me to thinking about how this database will be vetted. Is it a self-reporting type of thing? Are there folks in the background vetting products before they're posted? How is that going to work?
Yeah, that's our technology partners that go through that vetting process, but it's structured. I'm just going back to, sorry about the quick looking. The vetting process is really the transparency documents that the materials have already been vetted through third-party certifications. You're not in the common materials framework, the system, unless you've gone through third-party certifications, which then for bio-based materials, that becomes an issue because there are very few certifying bodies that for bio-based materials at this point. So we're looking at, that's why the Carbon Leadership Forum, University of Washington, Rocky Mountain Institute is looking at biogenetics and carbon and trying to understand, going back, they're all interrelated, going back to LCAs, ISO standards, and all of that to understand where bio-based materials through biogenetic materials, where that fits. So then the more commonly used certifying bodies like EPDs, then the bio-based materials could possibly, certain ones possibly receive an EPD as they've gone through the process. But they need to have the opportunity to do that. It needs to be described. So we're looking at the product rules, the protocols and the product rules for bio-based materials is a start. What are the protocols for that? So that can start to describe what, and they're different right now. They need to be aligned so it can be consistent for EPDs. So that's what's kind of happening behind the scenes as far as that. So that these certifications, that's the entry point into the system. So we needed to make sure that for each of the impact categories, there were the various certifications associated with the buckets and the sub buckets. So, the certifications are described in their transparency level. And from there, it flows as far as the different factors and the metrics we're looking at. And those metrics are common metrics across the different standards and certifying bodies as far as projects.
Okay, great.
Hope that sort of helps.
It does. Thank you. So we have 9 more minutes. I thought maybe we'd go back to your last slide of questions, and I'm kind of most interested in hearing your thoughts on these questions because you've been at this a while. You've seen the ups and downs.
Thank you for being kind.
You have just really a wealth of knowledge, and so I'd like to hear, what you think we can do and what kinds of things, what are the I guess the thoughts that we should leave with to be able to help advance this.
Yeah. Kind of going back to my career for a second, I had 3 phases to my career. My first phase was, a designer, had my own firm, lots of fun, lots of interesting projects, lessons learned, all of that. Then I went into my second phase, which was an educator, and then I learned a lot from that. And then my third phase in research as well, deep dive into research. And then my third phase has been this what can I give back phase, and how can I get involved. And I was just Annie Bevan, who's the CEO of Mindful Materials, said yesterday, how lucky you are, Linda, that at this point you can bring all those experiences together in kind of do what you want way and deep dive here and not. So that's one of my points to all of you is this idea of passion and curiosity collide, and you'll have opportunities for that as well. So in accelerating the adoption, a lot of that, when you have adoption, a lot of that has to do with education, tools and education, and this common understanding. It starts with a common understanding and then education around that and tools to help you with that. So those 3 prongs. And these are often given by universities or research centers or nonprofits and NGOs, because that's their role, especially nonprofits and NGOs. So look towards our wonderful non-profits like Habitable, Grace Farms, Rocky Mountain Institute, Carbon Leadership Forum, of course, USGBC, IWBI, and Living Future are all working hard on this. And our new kid on the block, please covet them and encourage them, because this is a long road. So that's our bio-based materials collaborative. If you want to get involved in something fresh and new, do this one. This one's fun. So the strategies to implement, I liked what you said, Rebecca, this charrette with your client. Your clients, as we know, our relationship with our clients and asking those right questions and working with them so closely, that's the best relationship one can have. No surprises there. So I have adopted this materials first approach to projects as an interior designer and working on interior environments. I always did that because that's where the people are. My other space of that's where the people are is IEQ and IEQ. They're all interrelated, and especially the lessons learned from the pandemic, express the importance of that. Um, so what is it in the materials realm that it is relegated to reuse? And materials reuse, we have to be careful with the materials in reuse because we have to look at it with the viewpoint that this could have unintended consequences. So this one is complicated for materials. That's why I've narrowed my focus to materials, and there's plenty to do there. And then lastly, quickly, collaborate across industry, overcome barriers, get involved, and start to all of the nonprofits need your help as members because you're the voice. We're not the voice, you're the voice. We're just gathering your voice together. And we can't find your voice if you don't tell us you're there. And so that's kind of my closing statement. I think we're to time.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Delaney, for setting it up. I'll hand it over to you now, Delaney.
All right. Hello. Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate your time and participation. And thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar series today. We hope that you join us next week. And I think that's everything. And Rebecca, anything else you'd like to say?
I really appreciate Linda's time putting this together. I know she kind of customized the presentation for us, and it's really great to see what's coming next in this arena. So thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thanks for your support and help, Rebecca. I appreciated that for sure. And Delaney for setting this up and everybody that's listening. And thank you to AIA Coach, especially my new frontier of historic uh, restoration and sort of circling back to my beginning. And so appreciate everything that AIA has done for the entire industry. Can't thank you enough.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so very much. And hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care.
Thank you.